Yeah, I got an email from John Taylor who wanted to know if the meeting is proceeding, and I told him it was. Yeah, I should check my email. I might have a few more of those.
Probably not. I got a phone call from his assistant, and so I told her that it was going to happen. So
okay,
it's good that he was checking in as well. That's great.
Yep. Bet there's going to be a run on generators.
Yeah.
Well, the weather the next couple of days is supposed to be pretty nice. Thank goodness.
Oh, that's good.
I'm looking forward to that.
I have a feeling a lot of people kind of shifted their priorities around today when power was lost.
Yes, we only, oh, okay. Oh, they're coming on now. Oh my gosh.
Oh, there was a bit of a queue. I was looking away from the meeting room screen, so I just let everybody in.
Oh, wow. We went from 11 to 29, just like that.
All right. Well, thank you people for coming.
It didn't say that, no.
So Nick, can you tell who's calling into the meeting versus who's on their computer?
Yeah, much like WebEx, the folks who call in are just listed by their phone number.
Okay. Because those folks won't be able to vote, right? Unless we'll have to ask them individually for their votes.
That is correct.
And we also need to let everybody know that if there's more than one person at their home, sharing a screen, that they each get a vote. So we'll have to get those people in as well during voting.
Okay.
What do you think, David? Think we should start?
Yep, I think we should. So I'd like to welcome people to our meeting of the Vashon Community Council. This is our 1-year anniversary. We had our first, Virginia Lure just asked, how do you call in? Oh, and someone else is answering. Okay, hopefully they can take care of that. Well, in any event, I thank you all for coming in. We're up to 39 participants. And so even on a day where we lost power like that, so that's great. So it's our 1-year anniversary. It's our annual meeting, so to speak. And we have a few things on the agenda. So I guess at this point, what I'll do is I'll have a look at the agenda, unless we need some more instruction on how to use Zoom. Diane?
Well, I think Nick is handling that, and I think it's always a good idea to run through those instructions. Okay, good enough.
Most folks are familiar with Zoom meetings now after almost 2 years of quarantine. Some kind of boilerplate stuff is please remain muted unless you are speaking. Anyone can unmute themselves at any time if you would like to speak. So when there are chances to speak and there's a pause, you can unmute and sound off. You're also welcome to put questions for speakers into the chat and they will get read for the benefit of the folks who are calling in and can't see the chat. Please only join with one device within proximity of each other, particularly. 2 devices next to each other have a tendency to cause feedback and connection issues. And that's about it. Okay.
Well, the first thing on our agenda is to, review and approve the agenda. So people have had this circulated. Are there additions, changes, corrections that anyone would like to make to this evening's agenda? Let me see. New building is concerned, approves building codes. People speaking in favor will each have up to 2 minutes to speak. That's item number 7 at 7:12. It's my understanding that Armin Yusufian has invited 2 guests to actually speak on the issue who would be considered experts. And so I would like to give those people more than 2 minutes because they would be speaking in opposition to this motion. Are there other items that people see on the agenda that need correction?
Well, I don't think that's something, so if there's going to be people speaking against the motion that give more than 2 minutes, then there should be people allowed to speak more than 2 minutes speaking in favor of the motion. Because there's a lot of people here who haven't been at previous meetings, and this is what we need to be fair.
But these people were brought in for the purpose of addressing the motion, not to just speak their opinions. So it's not as if, it's the normal kind of members of the community who just are putting in 2 minutes. There was a presentation regarding this motion. And so I think it's fair we could give, say, 5 minutes to the people who were brought to the meeting to address this issue. Michael, you had a question? Michael Lurie?
Yes. So, David, what you're suggesting changes the agenda. And it's my understanding that the rules of the Community Council require a vote of all Vashon residents that are at a meeting to approve any change to the agenda.
Okay. All right. And so we haven't made a vote yet, and we haven't changed the agenda. Are there those who would like to speak to whether or not we should allow additional time to the people who were invited by Armin Yusufian to address the issue? Yes, Michael?
Yeah, I don't think we should allow it. They're not Vashon residents. And again, this would be a change to the agenda. At a minimum, there should be a vote on this. And honestly, you know, I just got to say, 99.5% of the climate change scientists around the world who have been studying climate issues for decades are all in agreement. This is a problem. Our civilization.
Well, perhaps I could, if I could just interject, I don't think they're here to speak against climate change. I think the issue is the specific motion on the floor, the draft building code, and how that affects Vashon Island. It has a lot less to do with climate change.
I totally disagree, David. It has everything to do with climate change, because they're arguing about allowing natural gas, which is a major contributor to climate change. And I'll try to keep it short here. I'm sorry. Okay. But their argument about natural gas, it just doesn't hold water in terms of the longer term vision that we need to be looking at here.
Okay.
And it does contribute to climate change.
This is Armin Yusufian. Michael, you haven't even heard what they have to say yet. And one of them is a Vashon resident. And who decided that there should be a 2-minute limit in the first place? There was no vote on that. That was some arbitrary decision by your wife, apparently. So you have a conflict of interest.
Hey, Armin. Hey, Armin, let's not get personal. And also, Armin, if you want to make this motion, or David, if you want to make this motion, I'm willing to second it just so we can vote on it and move on. We're not going to argue about it if we can just vote on it.
Okay,
So does somebody want to make the motion and I'll second it?
No, this is you're just stifling debate. Last month I was invited
Armin, I totally want to hear what
you say, but Armin. Okay.
I want to hear the experts that Armin brought, and not
Armin, are you
with Michael about who said 2 minutes?
Okay, and so Armin, I will take that as a motion that you're making to extend the time limit for the 2 people that you've brought to the meeting to 5 minutes from 2 minutes. And is that your motion, Armin?
That sounds like a good motion, yes.
Okay, fine. And then Camille was going to second that. So then let's take a vote on that motion. And that is, should we allow 5 minutes for 2 people who were brought into this meeting specifically to address the issue of the King County Building Code, not a general climate change argument, but the King County Building Code for this meeting. All those who—
Wait a minute.
Okay.
There's a motion before the body, and we need to discuss the motion before we vote.
Sure. And Melvin, would you like to say anything?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
I'm in agreement with Diane in that I think the rules that apply to all the other people who are speaking should apply to anybody who wants to speak. I don't think there should be special leeway for people who are coming in supposedly as an expert, because we're all experts.
Okay. Was there someone else who had their hand raised on this particular issue? Okay, I guess that would— I see Ward Carlson, yes.
Okay, I'm one of the experts. I can dispose or get rid of a pre-assumption right away. I was and still am part of Kevin Jones's committee. I'm not a climate change denier. I'm here to just point out a technicality about what the consequences of limiting any local burning of natural gas will mean on the island. Namely, unless there are other technologies introduced, because Puget Sound Energy delivers 0.6 tainted, fossil fuel tainted kilowatt hours for every kilowatt hour that they send to the island. The consequence of your proposal is that there will be an increase in the amount of natural gas burned if you intend to use Puget Sound Energy electricity in order to substitute for the local burning of natural gas.
Okay, now
I could probably summarize, I've written a paper on this, I could probably summarize it in less than 2 minutes.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Now, who is the other person who was invited by Armin to speak? Is he or she present? Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is Armin. I'll let Todd speak for himself, but that was the Todd Myers, who is the director of the Center for the Environment at Washington Policy Center, and a national leading expert on these kinds of issues. And he's not here. Well, I'll let him speak for himself.
Okay.
I will let you vote on the agenda item first, and then I will give my comments later.
Okay, and Todd, my question is, would you be able to do this within 2 minutes, or do you think 5 minutes is necessary?
Well, I mean,
can't hear you. I believe you're muted.
Okay, somebody muted me.
Okay. Okay.
I will do whatever you say. 5 is better than 2, but I will abide by your rules.
Okay, thank you. Well, then I'd like to call the vote on the motion to amend.
Kevin has got his hand up.
David, one last quick comment. I would say that there's other folks here who are experts on this issue who I would say that equity is important to me. And if folks are offered more than 2 minutes of time to speak in opposed to the motion, then we have 2 guests who would also be equally offered time to speak in favor of it. So I would like us to consider that as we vote on the motion. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, you know, I guess we would have to do this by a hand vote because we don't have a poll that's been formulated for this issue. So let me see, we've got 53 participants right now. Okay, all those in favor of changing to allow 2 speakers, Todd Myers and Ward Carson, to speak 5 minutes instead of 2 minutes, please raise your hand and keep it raised so that I can see it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
This is Armin. Which side are we raising our hand for again?
Because I'm in favor. For extending it to 5 minutes from 2 minutes for the 2 speakers. Now, there are a number of people who are not on camera and I can't see what their vote is. For example, David Von Holde, Kyle Britz, Rob Piston, Stephanie, Fran, all these folks who are off camera, I can't see the vote.
Can also use the raise hand.
Okay, yeah, if you could do the raise hand, that would be great. So if people know how to do the raised hand. Okay.
I don't know how to do the raised hand.
Okay, I see you on camera. So
okay. Well, then I raised my hand.
Okay. I had it up to 12 votes. Now I have it to 16 votes. All those opposed to the motion, please either raise your hand on the screen or so that I can see you. And this would be opposed to the motion to extend time. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Wait, but do some people still have their raised hand thing up? Like, they voted before, and then you can't take it down. How do you take it down? Because Armin, it looks like you're voting against it right now.
Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It looks like 15, 16. It looks like the motion 17 has been voted down, 18. So 19, 20, 21. Okay, so we're going to just keep the discussion to 2 minutes for each person. Okay. And
I did not vote against my own motion. I'm not
I
sure what.
didn't count your vote, Armin. I didn't count any vote from you against the motion. But the vote was pretty clear that people wanted to limit everyone to 2 minutes. Okay, so
Okay,
let's.
we have now spent more time on this than if these people had spoken. And what's annoying is when the people who made this motion had quite a lengthy presentation. They've had like 5 presentations to this committee, to this council over the last 5 months. And I was invited last month to bring in an expert. I brought in 2. And now, without any previous vote that there was ever going to be a 2-minute limit, they're being limited. This doesn't make any sense, but whatever.
Okay. I appreciate your saying that too, Armin. Now, the other items on the agenda, does anyone have any other corrections or changes that they'd like to make to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Then we should look at the minutes of the last meeting. That's been circulated. Is there anyone who has any changes or corrections that they'd like to make to the minutes for the October 18th General Community Council meeting?
This is Virginia Lohr.
Okay.
I'm looking at the minutes and I'm wondering what Armin said. I don't see anything in the minutes about lengthy discussion of this amendment from last time.
Go ahead.
All I see is this is a motion that was proposed. This motion was seconded. There was a lengthy PSE presentation, but maybe I've forgotten, but I didn't. Was there lengthy discussion of this last time?
No, there wasn't.
Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear since Armin, I think, just said that there was. Thank you.
No, I think what he said is that he had brought this up previously to the board, actually, and said that he wanted to have someone who could speak against the motion. And I encouraged him to bring people to speak against the motion because, you know, I think there should be a difference of opinion on issues like that instead of all speaking with one voice if there are differences. Yes, Virginia?
But no one was asked to speak in favor of it, is my point. Is you said that Armin could ask people to come and speak against it. I don't recall people being told so, and you also may bring somebody in favor of it? Because did anyone speak in favor of it last time?
Yeah, it was proposed, the motion was raised, and then I believe that a person from King County did give a presentation about the issue. So
if that's the case, I didn't see that reflected in the minutes. Did I miss something? I haven't studied them closely. Okay. If that's the case, then
it was a previous meeting a couple months ago.
A couple of months ago. Okay, thank you.
The minutes of the meeting several months ago where a King County person gave like a 20 or 30-minute presentation. And it goes without saying that there were going to be proponents of the motion.
Okay, but that helps, that clarifies for me because I didn't understand, Armin, when you were, when was it that this had occurred? So now I understand that it happened at a previous meeting. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for bringing it up, Virginia. Are there any other questions about the minutes? Okay, well then we will adopt the minutes from the October 18th meeting. And next matter on the agenda, I'd like to introduce guests here from King County. Let's see, we've got John Taylor. I believe Bong is here, Bong Santo Domingo. Anyone else here from King County? Nicole Sanders.
Yeah. Hi, David.
Hi there. And I guess that's it. Well, welcome to our meeting and thank you for joining us. So the first item on the agenda is that at the October meeting, motion was moved and seconded to have the VMICC endorse the updated building codes being considered for approval by the King County Council. These new building codes would restrict most uses of fossil fuels in new commercial and large multifamily buildings in unincorporated King County. Kevin Jones introduced the motion. Virginia Lohr seconded it. Here's the wording of the motion. The Vashon-Maury Island Community Council is concerned about the climate and understands that greenhouse gas emissions from buildings is the #2 source of climate pollution in Washington state. Because of this, the VMICC endorses approval of updated building codes being considered for approval by the King County Council. These new building codes would restrict most uses of fossil fuels in new commercial and large multifamily buildings in unincorporated King County. Okay, I'd like to hear a discussion now. Are there people who would like to speak in favor of the motion? Ellen Kritzman, if you'd like to speak, let me just write this down. And as you've heard, we have a limit of 2 minutes per person on this. And who's going
I'm sorry.
David,
I wasn't raising my hand for that. I was raising it. I had raised it for the vote.
Oh, okay. And can't people take it down, or do they just have to click on their hand to take it down?
David,
yeah,
this is Armin.
I think it
would be appropriate that the
Oh, you got it.
David, this is Armin. I think it would be appropriate that the first two speakers be these experts that I invited, who will not necessarily be pro or con, but rather provide, illuminate the issue.
Okay, and that's fine with me, Armin. I don't mind taking them first. So the first people that we had to speak, Ward Carson, and thank you for joining our meeting.
I'd like Todd to go first, and let me just introduce him if I may.
Okay, that's fine too.
So Todd Myers is the director of the Center for the Environment at the Washington Policy Center. He's one of the nation's leading experts on free market environmental policy. He's the author of a landmark book, Eco Fads, How the Rise of Trendy Environmentalism is Harming the Environment. And he's been a Wall Street Journal expert panelist for energy and environment. And I give you Todd Myers.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you very much, Armin. Just say, if you ever get an advocate for you, make sure he's as good as Armin. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So let me just start out by saying that for more than a decade, I've worked on climate policies and have advocated carbon taxes. In fact, in 2016, campaigned for a carbon tax to reduce the risk of climate change. But I think the concern that I have about this policy is that the more concerned you are about climate change, the less you should actually support it. The first is that many of you know that we just adopted a cap and trade policy, a statewide cap and trade carbon reduction policy. The purpose of that law was to stop the sort of ad hoc approach that we had with lots of little regulations, doing little bits and pieces here and there, and create a statewide, more rationalized policy. If CO2, it sets targets, and if we're not meeting the targets, price goes up, and it is guaranteed to meet those targets because you can only emit what is allowed under the cap. In other words, whether we pass this law or whether we pass this regulation or not, we will meet our CO2 targets. It is now the law of the state of Washington. The question is, what is the best way to do it, and what is effective and what is cost effective? The reality is that this is an extremely expensive way to cut CO2, both in terms of environment and on the impact on people. I'll just sum this up really quickly, which is the cost of reducing CO2 emissions this way by banning natural gas costs anywhere between $100 and $200 per metric ton. By way of comparison, California's cap and trade costs about $20 a metric ton, and Seattle City Light cuts CO2 for about $10 a metric ton. In other words, this costs about 20 times as much to reduce CO2 as available alternatives. It basically wastes 95% of the cost. The more you're concerned about climate change, the more you should demand that we get the most bang for a buck, that every dollar reduces CO2, and spending $20 to get $1 worth of value in CO2 is not a good way to do it. So I'm basically, my time is up now, but I'm happy to, if people have questions or I need to clarify something, there's a little bit more about cost that I can talk about, but I'll stop there given the discussion about time. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the next person would be Ward Carson.
Yeah, let me just quickly introduce Ward. So Ward Carson is a Burton resident. He has a PhD in mechanical engineering. The field of mechanical engineering, which I also have a degree in, is the field that deals with things like heat transfer, thermal energy, BTU content of different energy sources, and so on. And he has written a number of papers and written articles in the Beachcomber, I think also in the Loop. And as he just said himself, he is not a climate denier. And so I give you Ward Carson.
Good evening, Ward. Proceed.
Armin. Okay, I'm not a denier. In fact, I'm a previous and still, as far as I'm concerned, a member of the Vashon Climate Alliance. So I know Kevin very well. I know Virginia very well. I don't recognize any of the other people here. And my objection to this, and it's not an objection, I'm not going to vote for or against. I just want to point out that to deny people to spend or to burn natural gas locally because Puget Sound Energy burns the equivalent of about 1.8 kilowatt hours of extra natural gas for every 1 kilowatt hour that they deliver to Vashon. You are going to, by doing this in the current situation, you're going to end up burning more natural gas if you have Puget Sound Energy deliver the electricity necessary to replace your current burning of natural gas on the island. And I can demonstrate this, and I've written a paper on this. I can demonstrate this just with an example. If you, say, for example, burn 1.8 kilowatt hours of electricity or of
or
natural
your time
gas.
is almost up. Just wanted
Okay.
to let you know your time is almost up.
All right. Well, my example shows that if you burn 3 times as much natural gas on the island as the kilowatt hours that you get from electricity, which is probably normal because you're going to use it for cooking, you're going to use it for heating space, you're going to use it for maybe drying clothes. If you replace that current process with no natural gas burned on the island, my example will show that you'll end up spending or burning 50% more natural gas in the plants of Puget Sound Energy than you would if you left the current situation in place. And
thank you very much, Ward. Your time is up.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So for both of the presenters, if either of you guys could send kind of like copies of your, like how you did your math, you know, like how you ended up with these conclusions, I think that'd be really helpful because 2 minutes is not really enough to explain it, but I think council members would be interested. So if you could stick any of that in the chat, or even just we can send it out later. I know the vote's taking place today, but I think that those kinds of numbers are really important for people to see.
Yeah, I'll be glad to send 900 words on this topic that I think will convince you that that is correct. You'll end up spending or burning in one hypothetical situation, 50% more natural gas than if you left the current situation as is.
Can
Okay.
you do
Ward,
that
could you
in
include the
less
link to
words?
Pardon?
Can you put the link to your research paper in the chat, Ward?
I could. I don't have a particular link for it right now, but I have a copy written, and then I could even send it to you if you have an address for me to send it to. And well, I sent a copy actually to Kevin Jones, and maybe he can make my copy available to you.
Okay.
I can get it from him.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Okay, and who else is it that would like to speak on this motion?
There's another number of hands raised. There's Dave Van Holt, Seth Zuckerman, Nicole Sanders from King County, and Kirsten Smith.
Okay, David Von Hold, would you like to speak to this issue?
Thank you very much. My name is Dave Van Hold. I'm a Vashon resident of many years. I'm also a mechanical engineer with 2 degrees and work for Washington State University Energy Program. I'm afraid I don't do the fancy economic dance, although I could have some comments on that, and particularly the long-term impacts of living our life based on economics as opposed to human life. But I'll just speak to Mr. Ward's paper, which I did have a chance to review. There's a few basic problems here in my humble assessment, and they really have to do with the basic efficiency assumptions that are placed in the paper. Rather than dig into all that, I would really suggest that what we do is have a civil discussion based on science and engineering about the true efficiencies of these various technologies and the particular mixture of Puget Sound Energy's generation mix and what is a current and likely mixture of in-use applications here. I would comment that I've spent about 28 years in the energy efficiency field, working for Seattle City Light, working for Washington State University, working for King County. So I do have a fair amount of experience in this area, but that's not really the point. The point is, let's have a good, clean review of anyone who wants to present papers so that we can make this case, because it is a fairly complex topic. And I've had internal conversations with people, and I don't want to just jump all over people and say something's wrong and something's right, but there are some basic assumptions in this paper which I would strongly disagree with all due respect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Seth Zuckerman. Need to unmute yourself, Seth. There you go.
I just want to make the point that it may be, whatever the case may be about PSE's current energy mix, by the year 2030, it's required to be carbon neutral. And by 2045, it's required, all generation in Washington State is required to be fossil free. So if you start to build a new piece of infrastructure, be it a commercial building or a multifamily home, and you install gas appliances, then you're locked in for 20 years. And the carbon emissions of those appliances are not going to change. But as we clean up our energy supply, it is going to change. It is going to become cleaner. And so that's the only way to make that transition.
Now, I don't know, Seth, are you an expert on this subject? Because is there anything in that rule that requires Puget Power or Puget Energy not to burn fossil fuels in order to generate electricity?
There is, and I'll put a link to an article about it in the chat if people want to educate themselves further.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying that the legislation that's already been passed would require them to go to renewable resources in order to generate electricity?
Yes, even PSE, even investor-owned utilities will be required to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Nicole Sanders.
Hi, thank you for your time. I was here a couple months ago. I'm just coming back to sort of recap things. So in September, King County staff transmitted proposed energy code amendments proposing multiple actions, including requiring increased energy efficiency, solar readiness for buildings, as well as requiring a small amount of on-site solar power generation. So all those codes are also in the proposed ordinance. The codes would also disallow on-site fossil fuel combustion for space heating, and then for hot water circulation systems. So that's typically found in multifamily buildings, again, 4 stories and taller, and larger commercial buildings. And those codes would reduce natural gas and propane consumption in new buildings, as well as for large retrofit projects. So these amendments were proposed primarily to reduce on-site releases of climate changing emissions with an eye on equity. BIPOC communities will be disproportionately affected by climate change and are already disproportionately affected by air pollution. We're happy to say the proposed code changes will significantly reduce emissions in the coming years, with a cost increase of only 0.5% to 1.5% expected for affordable housing developments. I also wanted to note that there are a lot of additional benefits to reducing natural gas consumption in buildings. Those include reducing air pollution generally, including nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide, reducing fugitive emissions. So there are leaks in the distribution system. Escaped unburned natural gas is 34 to 86 times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. That is a concern. And then these
Nicole, I think your time is up.
Really? Already? I was timing it earlier.
I'm timing it, and I have her with an extra half minute.
Oh, good. I'm sorry. My clock screwed up. So
that's okay.
Please continue.
Okay. So I was just going to say, and also reducing potential explosion events. Recent example, a lot of us remember a 2016 Greenwood gas explosion destroyed 3 buildings, affected another 36. Across the country, local fire departments respond to 340 gas leaks a day. And then the last comment was really just that, sort of echoing previous comments, basically that these buildings will be for a long time. And once we hit 2030, the electricity is carbon neutral. And that's really what we're trying to build towards. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And that was 2 minutes. Okay. All right. Next would be Kirsten Smith.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Smith. I'm not a Vashon resident. I live in West Seattle, and I work in policy work for the American Institute of Architects. And we work on the energy code at the state level and at various local jurisdictions. And we spend a lot of time advocating for building decarbonization as outlined in the state's energy strategy. So it will be clear we are not experts on natural gas, but we are experts at building sustainable buildings. And I would like to speak to the code itself.
Okay.
Architects believe that energy codes are the most impactful way to improve building performance when it comes to energy, because it puts all buildings on the same playing field. And in doing so, it informs the manufacturers of technology like heat pumps that are required to implement the code, that a growing market will be in place for their products, thus driving innovation and lowering prices. Well, we have a lot of work to do on other policies to address carbon emissions from existing buildings. Making sure new buildings are built right from the beginning is critical. And Seth and Nicole brought this up as well. These buildings will last 50 years, and lowering or eliminating greenhouse gases emitted from them will impact communities for decades to come. It will cost significantly more to retrofit these buildings in the future than to build them without fossil fuel equipment now. I had a little bit on the health impacts, but Nicole covered that. Something I didn't know when we started this process is that indoor air pollution is a real thing from fossil fuel fired equipment, and it causes asthma and other health impacts, particularly for the young, the old, and the low-income communities who already bear the brunt of environmental pollution. And then finally, architects work closely with the Housing Development Consortium to support stronger energy codes and other building policies to ensure that low-income households enjoy the same health and heating and cooling benefits as the wealthy. Making apartments more energy efficient also supports low-income households by lowering utility costs because the building uses energy more efficiently. Thanks, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, and Kevin?
Yes, thank you, David, and thanks to the council. I did want to comment on the feedback that we heard from Todd and Ward. I'll start with Ward. It's still a member of the Vashon Climate Action Group. Thanks, Ward. I'm glad that people are peer reviewing the work you've done, because I think it's so important to be accurate in the assessments that we make. I do want to point out that when we talked, and Ward, you can jump on if I misrepresent our conversation, I asked what would happen if the energy we got from Puget Sound Energy today was carbon free, like from a public utility district. And my recollection of your answer was, then this proposal makes perfect sense. As Seth pointed out, in just 9 years, PSC is required to deliver carbon neutral electricity by the year 2030. The other thing, Todd, I really appreciate the fact that we're making legislative progress on dealing with the climate. That does not happen, of course, in all forums, as you well know. And the challenge that I face is that we've heard a lot of stories about this process, this legislation is going to do it. And so far, the evidence is that Washington State is far, far behind the power curve in terms of making the changes we need. So I am a total fan of any movement that will get us in the direction of reducing combustion of methane and its associated leaks and all the health consequences in favor of efficient electric heat pumps, which is sustainable and moving us towards renewable energy. I'm all in favor of that. I think Ward's argument says PSC just needs to move faster. And I certainly hope they do. And I hope that we on the Vashon community will encourage them to do that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. Next would be Camille Reeves.
David, this is Armin. I'm calling for the orders of the day. This is a privileged motion. It calls for the agenda that was stated to be resumed immediately. We are 22 minutes beyond the end of the stated agenda on this motion.
Armin, I just want to say really quick that actually, if you'll read, so our agenda is there. It's a sort of, we're guessing at how much time it's going to take. These are not exact times and they can't be. We're trying to leave it open for people to discuss. And I really appreciate that you watching that, but we do need to finish this discussion. I'm going to make a really quick comment and I'm
okay.
Your statement is out of order. This is a privileged motion. If you want to vote against it, you can immediately. It requires a 2/3 vote to overturn it.
And Armin, where do you get this motion from in the Democratic Rules of Order?
Well, look them up. It's a call for orders of the day is a conventional motion in any parliamentary procedural thing. Look it up in your Democratic order.
I'm looking at the Democratic Rules of Order right now, and I don't see that listed in the motions.
Well, refer me to where it is then, because the last time we went through this, you ended up finding it, and I was right, and everybody else was wrong.
Well, it was a different issue, but on this,
yes, it was a different issue.
Right.
So,
it was a different issue. That one was
so Armin, right
vote.
Now, is Armin. Can I please speak,
yeah.
and then maybe you
I
can talk about this in the chat with David?
Armin, I agree with Camille that we do not set these agendas for specific times. And so I would just say that the motion is out of order. But thank you for bringing that up, Armin. And Camille, if you could speak.
Thank you. I just really want to quickly say that I'm definitely concerned about climate change, and I really appreciate everyone who's spoken tonight. I feel much more educated about it. I wish there was more than sound bites, but that's all we have time for because so many people want to speak. And the one other thing that I want to bring up, other than climate change and emissions, is how we get natural gas, and that's fracking. And so I think it's really important to consider that's really endangering our groundwater, and that, like Kirsten was saying, we want to build buildings with the idea of the future and not build buildings with kind of old technology, even if it is more economical right now. Seth made a really good point that if we already have these goals, we already have by law requirements to meet certain emission standards, then hopefully we will be able to do that. And we should not be building infrastructure on unsustainable things that could potentially compromise other resources that are essential to our lives. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And next, who I think that would be Armin. Armin, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. First of all, I think I'm going to end up making a motion that this motion is out of order, because what does it have to do with Vashon? This ban proposed by the King County Council is for apartment buildings 4 stories or taller. There is no zoning on Vashon that would allow an apartment building probably even 3 stories. So it just doesn't apply. Or for new commercial buildings. It's doubtful that there will be any new commercial building anytime in the near future on Vashon Island. So that's point number one. Point number two, where is this electricity going to come from? Has there been any study or looked into the capacity of the grid, how this increased energy is going to be produced? If it's going to come from recyclables, the rare earth elements that are used in the battery storage and so on are being mined by child labor in third world countries, slave labor in China. Our Attorney General has indicated that China is an adversary. So all we're doing is putting money in the pockets of our adversaries. And then in addition, there's the recycling issue. So because these windmills are carbon fiber blades, they last about 15, maybe 20 years. They go into landfills. So has the entire life cycle of this been looked into? I don't think so. So I think this begs maybe another committee being formed to look into this. And then there's the affordability issue, because this is going to end up increasing utility costs for those who can least afford it. The Affordable Housing Committee should have jurisdiction over this as well. So there are a number of issues. And I think, frankly, the motion is out of order in the first place because it doesn't really impact Vashon Island specifically. And the documents for this organization are that it's supposed to address Vashon-specific issues, and it doesn't.
Okay. Thank you, Armin. Who do we have next who wish to speak to this issue?
By the way, that was a motion, or it's going to end up being a motion, that this motion is out of order and should basically be dismissed.
Okay, and
there's a motion.
I think Michael wants to speak next, and then I think it's Stephanie. If I'm wrong about that, you can correct me.
Okay, Michael.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm holding here in front of me the current issue of New Scientist magazine. It has a 6-page article on the rare earth elements and minerals required by renewable energy and electric cars. And they have an editorial, and basically there's some studies in the article, and they say that if you take into account the carbon savings from a green transition, it far outweighs the cost of not doing it. So in other words, they basically looked, yes, we have problems with mining, and we need to recycle a lot of these minerals and rare earth elements a lot. And that's already starting to happen. China is investing billions in recycling electric car batteries. It's not perfect yet, but the studies that they point to say that overall, that this transition to renewable energy is going to for sure be a net positive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie.
Hi, I didn't really prepare anything, but just want to speak to a couple of points that were raised. And I work as a clinical social worker on the island. And so I'm really in the business of helping people recover from trauma. And to your point, Armin, about why Vashon Islanders should weigh in on this. Well, we're part of King County. Yes, maybe we won't have a 4-story building, but we share the same earth. We share the same air, the same climate. We're raising children and grandchildren together, who obviously are going to be totally in harm's way with climate effects as they march on. I'm here because I want to prevent more trauma and more displacement and conflict and air pollution and fires and hurricanes and all of it. And, we talk about it a lot, so I won't read the whole list, but it seems reasonable and prudent to change our building codes so that we can be pivoting and transitioning and sending strong market signals to the suppliers and manufacturers of the products we're going to need. It makes sense to me. The other thing I want to just say is that I don't live in an apartment building, but I did have a home once that was heated with a heat pump, and our water was also sort of a hybrid heat pump, and we made a lot of energy efficient choices. And we got rid of our propane tank, and it was wonderful. And our energy costs were so low. It was ridiculous how much money we saved. And we were more comfortable than before because we could keep the heat a little higher, knowing that it didn't impact our carbon footprint. And it was cheaper than what we were using before. Of course, we didn't have natural gas with propane, but still it's very cheap and very comfortable. So I just really want to challenge the notion that people are going to be inconvenienced. And it is the people who live at the margins who are also most at risk of impacts of climate change. So I think we have to think a little bigger than our own interests and pocketbooks. Thank you.
Your time is up, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you. Are there other people here who would like to speak to this motion for or against? And I'm going through the participants, and so far I don't see anyone. Now, Armin, what I would say is what you have made is what is referred to in the Democratic Rules of Order as a point of order, believing that this motion breaches the rules of this body. And so you are, at this point, saying that it does not apply to Vashon, I can rule on that unless you ask for a vote on this matter.
I am looking for a second to my motion that this is out of order.
Okay. Is there a second on Armin's motion that this is on his point of order?
I'll second it.
Okay. Well, then, with no further discussion, I will call this for a hand vote of the members present. And the issue is a vote by the Community Council appropriate on the King County Building Code, which applies to commercial buildings, even though there are very few commercial buildings of the size that it's intended to apply to that can be built on Vashon, although there is commercial property on Vashon where this building code could be enforced. So all those who are in favor of Armin's vote, his motion, which is to say that this is out of order, essentially, for the Community Council to vote on this issue, please raise your hand. And go ahead, Armin. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I did want to make one statement in favor of my own motion, since there is the opportunity for discussion.
Actually, and that is not on a point of order. It's called with no further discussion.
That's correct.
Well, if you can explain it though, and I don't believe I did give you an opportunity to explain it. So you could briefly explain it, Armin. So we need to unmute Armin. Okay.
So can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
So my position is this is not specific to Vashon, and it violates the organization, the documents or organizing this entity. But even if it is, it's a very tenuous connection, and it creates the precedent that any Tom, Dick, or Harry can make any motion about anything, world peace, what's going on in Scotland, you name it, and we would have an endless series of special interests, virtue signaling, co-opting this organization to advance their own pet project. They can have their pet projects and they can lobby those on their own. They don't need to be bogging down this entity for things that have only a tenuous, if any, real connection to Vashon Island.
Okay. Are there any, at this point then, I will take a vote on whether it's against the good of the order for Vashon to go forward with this motion. All those who find that this motion is against the good of the order for the Vashon Community Council, please raise your hand either so I can see you or by showing a hand, on the screen. Okay, I see 1, 2.
Again, we're showing that we're in favor of my motion, just to be clear.
Correct. This is in favor of Armin's motion. And if you are not showing on the screen, you need to show a hand, you know, with a show hand signal. Okay, and I'm going through so far. I have 3 people in favor of the motion. All those opposed to the motion, please give me a show of hands. Opposed to Armin's motion? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's pretty clearly outvoted, Armin. Now, one thing I would like to say that my concern about motions of this nature is that in the old days of the community council, we had a land use committee. And one of the reasons that we had this committee is that when we had issues that were complex, they could be considered in a committee setting where, you know, you have more time and you have more study of these issues. And so, you know, I just wonder if this is the time where we should be starting such a committee. So when we do have motions like this, we could further consider the issues and then have a report from the committee on what the committee found. It's just a thought I wanted to raise. Now, at this point, there's no further discussion on the motion. And we do have a poll for voting on the motion, which makes it a lot easier than reading hands. So our host of the meeting, Nick Simmons, if you could start the poll on this issue, I would appreciate it.
David, I have another motion.
What's that? I'll read the motion.
David,
excuse me.
David, I have another motion.
Armin, what's your other motion?
This motion is out of order because the documents filed with the Secretary of State's office for the VMICC indicate it would be a 501c3. That's operative now because that's what's been filed with the Secretary of State's office. 501c3s are to avoid lobbying. This motion basically is an effort to do lobbying.
Armin, I'm gonna say that this is out of order for this motion. Okay. So
why? Lobbying is prohibited by a 501c3, and that's what you guys are engaged in.
501c3. If we were a 501c3, that might be a different thing, but we are at this time looking to become a 501c6. If we do become a 501c6, because the previous community council had been a 501c6, we would not be bound by our articles of incorporation with the state. We would be bound by the previous articles of incorporation of the previous community council that was a 501c6. So I'm gonna find you out of order for that reason, Armin.
Well, all of that is irrelevant because right now you have filed with the Secretary of State as a public benefit charity.
Not as a charity. No, Armin, you're misquoting the language, and there's a big difference between a charity and a charitable organization. Okay, so, and in any event, I'd like to proceed with the motion. Bill?
Yeah, I have read the Articles of Incorporation, and it specifically states in capital letters that this organization will be run as a public charity. It specifically states that. So this motion is, in fact, a violation of the codes that govern the operation of a public charity.
Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up the, I wanna see that specific language because I don't believe that's what it specifically says at this point.
It says it right on your website with what you've posted there also.
Okay, hold on a sec.
I can also provide you the information where the codes that govern public charities specifically states that this motion is a no-go.
We are not a 501c3 at this point, but let me open up what you're talking about. So
public charity is not a buzzword. It is a defined legal term, and it is a 501c3. If you look a little bit later down in your Articles of Incorporation, you reference 501c3 in the Articles of Incorporation.
Even 501c3s can engage in some lobbying. It just can't be a substantial part of the organization's business.
Well, actually, no. Bill is, if we are at this point operating under the rules of a 501c3, then you're correct. We cannot be lobbying for legislation. This would be considered an item of legislation. Now, and let me just open up the articles again so I can see.
Yeah, and also you don't want to go for being a 501c6 because what you have posted on your website as your policies and procedures, you're looking at a 501c4, not a C6.
Okay.
You're looking at being a social welfare organization, which is community relation type stuff for housing, parking, sidewalks. That's what a 501c4 is. And your documentation you have posted on your policies and procedures, that's what you're doing. You are not operating as a 501c3 based on the documentation on the website and discussions that have been recorded in your meetings of minutes.
Yeah. You know,
hey, you know what? I just want to say really quick, I really appreciate that people are bringing this up, but why wasn't this brought up before we had all this discussion? Like, why wasn't something sent to someone in an email when this was proposed? Why didn't somebody say something at the beginning of the meeting? Because if this is literally legally moot, why have we spent so much time discussing it only to be like, oh wait, now that it's 8 o'clock?
Well, no,
sorry,
Camille, I think that the motion, even though it's not very timely, is one that needs to be addressed. I think that the articles
definitely, absolutely. But what I'm saying is, why didn't people bring this up earlier? So we didn't like wait.
And I think that's a good point, Camille. It should have been brought up earlier before we engaged in the discussion. And I apologize to the organization for proceeding, without that reference to the 501c3. And it is specified in what we presently have as our Articles of Incorporation. Now, what I would suggest we do at this point is that the democratic rules of procedure would allow us to postpone this issue. And I think until we have clarification about the actual documentation of this organization and the nature of the organization, it makes sense not to vote on it, but to postpone it until we actually have decided how we wish to proceed as either a 501c6, 501c4, or 501c3. That's still in the process, and I would not like us to vote on an issue that would be contrary to the stated purpose of this organization. And it does specify, as Bill indicated, 501c3 right in the Articles of Incorporation. Kevin, I see your hand is raised.
Let's see, my familiarity with 501c3s is that you're prohibited from lobbying for a political candidate. There may be other conditions. I also believe that the community council's role is to understand the position of the people who live on Vashon Island. The King County Council will be voting on this proposal. Mm-hmm. We have an opportunity, as I understand this council is chartered, to take an assessment of the people on Vashon so that that can be used as guidance for our elected officials. I don't see that as lobbying in any sense. I see that as providing some information about the general views held by Islanders through this body, which has some level of endorsement, because you have a process and people know what it is, and you're not elected officials, we understand that, but it's representative of the voice of Vashon. So I frankly don't see I don't see that there's a risk of proceeding. I think that there's a risk of not proceeding. If the council is unable to take an assessment of the people on Vashon, then I am curious what the council's role is. So I'd recommend that we proceed with the vote.
David, could I read you one long sentence directly from the IRS website?
Sure, Bill, but again, we're not presently listed as a 501c3 yet.
This is where I'm getting my information. So this is directly off the IRS website.
Okay.
An organization will be regarded as attempting to influence legislation if it contacts or urges the public to contact members or employees of a legislative body for the purpose of proposing, supporting, or opposing legislation, or if the organization advocates the adoption or rejection of legislation. And this is right out of the IRS codes on things that will get a nonprofit revoked.
And Bill, I'm familiar with that particular part of the legislation. And I think you're correct. And for that reason, if this is the sort of work we intend to do, we are not well suited as a 501c3.
I'd strongly encourage you to look at 501c4, not 501c6.
Okay.
And that's based upon your published documentation at this point. Your policies and procedures document and the contents of your meeting minutes on things that are actually being discussed, you are operating as a 501c4.
Okay. All right. And
this is Armin. This is Armin. I want to respond to Camille and Kevin. Camille, I did not want to get into this messiness tonight. This was what I was trying to explain to the board a week ago, and to avoid having exactly what is now happening. As for Kevin, the IRS codes, and again, that doesn't even necessarily matter. The VMICC filed as a public benefit charity, those are the exact words, with the Secretary of State's office, and you are not a director. And believe it or not, you who are directors, I'm trying to keep you people out of trouble. If you violate these things under Washington State RCWs, you are potentially committing a gross misdemeanor. And I don't even want to get into the jail sentence and fines that go with that. This is out of order.
Armin, you know what though? Like you,
Camille,
if
I'm not
you
done.
didn't,
Camille, I'm not done.
No, I
You're
know,
interrupting
but
me.
you,
Camille,
hang on,
I'm
no,
trying
we
to
have
keep
to.
you people out of trouble.
But you know what? Terry is raising his hand. Justin is raising his hand. There's people who are raising their hand, and I see that you need to keep us in line. But we also want to hear from others besides you and
Okay, and I'd like to call on Terry.
Well, this is exactly the thing that I hope to avoid when we tried to start another community council about 3 or 4 years ago. And that's that I wanted this organization to be a place where we could freely discuss whatever we wanted to discuss. And since we don't get any money from the government, we're not connected with the government, we are not legally bound that way. We're basically just expressing our freedom of speech that we recommend one thing or another. And there's no reason why we can't say that as a group or as an individual. I think this whole thing is just blown completely out of proportion.
And a 501c4 would support your stance.
Well, we don't get any money from anybody. You know, we're just a group of people in a community expressing our opinion. And that's it.
And Terry, unfortunately, I have to take this one on my shoulders because I was the one who filed the articles of incorporation. I was the one who, we had previously been incorporated as a 501c3. It had been changed to a 501c6, which I understand is also not the best organization. But until we straighten it out and change that as an article of incorporation, we would be proceeding against our articles of incorporation with the state. And that's unfortunate. And I don't know that this is the kind of urgent motion that would require us to, I'd say that in the month between now and say the next meeting, we should change those articles of incorporation or make whatever changes are necessary to become a 501c4 or C6 as the case may be. Okay, now Justin, you had an issue?
Yeah, I feel compelled to point out that through the course of this discussion, several individuals have dominated the conversation, spoke over the chair, spoke over the secretary, much to the detriment of everyone else at this meeting. And regardless of how important they feel their opinions are, if we cannot conduct ourselves in an appropriate manner, that all individuals should wait and raise their hands and be recognized by the chair before they speak.
Thank you, Justin. Are there other people who want to address this issue? Okay, now, unfortunately, I do think that looking at the articles of incorporation of this organization, we were intending to become a 501c3. We incorporated as essentially a charitable organization, a charity nonprofit, and that was a mistake. I think that the remedy for that mistake is to table this until we can change the nature of the organization.
So moved.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. I don't think we should necessarily ignore this motion. I think that though that at this time it would be contrary to our, our articles of incorporation. So the motion to postpone, that would be, if I could just address that. A member may, anytime before the motion has been voted on, move to postpone the motion on the floor. Can be to a specific future occasion. A member believing that consideration of a particular motion would be unwise can move that we postpone the motion indefinitely. If the motion to postpone indefinitely is seconded and passed, well, I would be moving to postpone it to the next meeting. It can be brought up at another meeting. So you moved and I would second your motion, Diane. So if we could have a hand vote on the motion to postpone this motion, I would like to take that now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. It seems close to unanimous. Sorry. Oh, I see. Okay, that motion carries. So we will be postponing the vote on this motion until the December meeting. And hopefully by then we can have some clarification on our charter, essentially on the articles of incorporation. And, I apologize that this has not been clarified already. We've had some difficulties with Noah Roselander. I see your hand is raised. Is that for a vote or because you want to speak to something?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't quite understand what just happened. There's 52 participants currently. And you counted up to 19 and said it was unanimous, so I'm not quite clear.
No. Okay, hold on. What I saw when I was counting was unanimous, and a lot of people who I don't see now. Let me continue. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you could raise your hands again. 6.
How do you do that?
8, 9. There's a
raise your hand.
There's a icon where it says reaction. There's an icon where it says raise hand. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, it says reactions. And there's one that says raise hand. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you could just keep it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, Okay, we have 30 votes to postpone, and now all those who are opposed to postponing this motion, if you could take down your reactions, those who just voted in favor of postponement, and then you have to, there's a thing for lower your hand. And so I'll give a couple of moments for people to lower their hands. All those opposed to the motion to postpone, please raise your hand at this point.
David, I don't see the lower hand icon. I just see raise hand.
Oh, if you go to reactions, there's one for raise hand. If you've already hit raise hand, then one is up for lower your hand. So the only way you can see a lower hand is if you've already raised your hand.
So
well, I have.
You have to go back to reactions, Virginia. Go back to the reactions and it'll let you do it. Click on the reaction button.
Yeah.
And then it should say lower hand.
Doesn't.
Bah humbug.
Okay.
We won't count yours.
Okay. Lower mine for me.
I'm counting all those now who are opposed to postponement of the motion until the December meeting, and I count 4. So the vote that I counted was 30-4. So the motion will be postponed. And again, like I said, I apologize for having an issue with the nature of our incorporation, but that's an important issue and it will be cleared up. Because, if we want to support motions like this, then we cannot be a 501c3. It would be an important part of what we do. All right, the next item on the agenda is committee updates. The Communications Committee, Diane and Michaela, do you have an announcement?
In the interest of time, I will pass on any announcements.
Okay, and Affordable Housing Committee, is Morgan present? I don't see Morgan here with the report, so let's move on to the next item on the agenda. Treasurer's report and budget, Nick Simmons.
So I'm just going to give a verbal report. I have a PDF, but I'm going to go really fast because we're way our timeline is totally blown. So we spent somewhere around $600 over the last year. All of that money came out of board members' pockets. Our expenses were flyers, a couple of Cisco WebEx accounts for previous meeting hosting. The current Zoom account is being donated by the president of the board. We had some additional expenses, miscellaneous. The budget that is being proposed for next year, so all of that totaled up to $728. The budget that's being proposed for next year is PO box for mailing address at $148, the yearly corporate report, which is $10, filing fee to recover the 501c6 that the previous community council was incorporated under. The IRS still has all of that data because it has lapsed. It's going to be a $600 recovery fee from the IRS. We will continue to have discussions about whether a 501c6 or potentially a 501c4 is the most appropriate, and make a decision based on that. We'll probably bring some of this to the council and some of it will happen within the board. The Zoom meeting account for the next year will continue to be donated, and we are considering renting a room for in-person meetings so that we can all shout face-to-face instead of shouting at a computer screen. That would be somewhere in the realm of $240 for a total budget of $1,068, give or take some, for the projected expenses for 2022. We currently don't have a good fundraising plan. We have some ideas about print-on-demand merchandise bearing the community council logo, which hopefully could generate some revenue. Other than that, this would all just be by donation. And if the pattern from this last year holds true, most of it will come out of the board's pockets. Thank you. Any questions can be addressed to me. That's Nick at VMICC.org.
Okay. Any questions of Nick regarding our budget? All right. Well, do you have a poll to adopt the budget?
I do. The polls, because we were setting them up during the power outage, are slightly, standby one, budget. Choice 1 is yay and choice 2 is nay. So should the budget be adopted? If you think it should, please choose choice 1. If you think it should not be adopted, please choose choice 2. Thank you.
Okay.
David, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. I have a comment, but I think this is going to end up being committee work that should be done at the next board meeting or whatever. But it looks like you're going to have to end up amending, and you and I discussed this yesterday, you're going to end up having to amend the articles of incorporation. And per the RCWs, I think that's going to be a multi-$1,000 expenditure. We can get into that later, but I just want to give you a heads up of that.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I'm going to leave that poll up for another probably minute or so, and then I'll just end the poll. So vote at your leisure.
Okay. Now we're ready for an update from John Taylor, the Director of the Department of Local Services. John, you still with us?
I am.
All right.
Good. I hung in.
Okay.
That was one of the most lively discussions of Robert's Rules of Order I've heard in many, many years. And I say that as someone who is a staffer to several different city councils, as well as legislature. I'm going to be pretty brief and just hit a couple of high notes. So again, John Taylor, Director of the Department of Local Services for King County. There's a lot going on out there in the unincorporated area. Good news, COVID cases are coming down. So the daily average of COVID cases in King County right now is 283 new cases a day. For context, that is less than half of what it was in September. We were at about 644 new cases of COVID per day. So, I was on a cabinet call yesterday, and public health is feeling pretty good about the direction we're going in. Hospitalizations are down. We had 13 new hospitalizations on average this week. Same time period in September, we had about 28. So again, about half. I realize that, that's still much higher than it was a year ago, but I think we're heading in the right direction. So keep faith, everybody. We'll get through this. And we're, I think we're on the right trend, I'm happy to say. Weather, I think it looks like most of you have power based on the people I can see, but I know you were without power for much of the day today and last night. We have a break in this storm, this hydrologic river. It looks like we have another system coming in Thursday going into Friday. That system looks not quite as wet or as windy as this one, but I would say to folks, just be mindful that when you have a prolonged period of wet weather like this, that's when we begin to see landslides. And on Vashon, we have a couple of spots on Vashon and Maury. I shouldn't forget Maury Island, where we do get landslides. So, just be mindful of that. If you see anything, call the county's roads hotline, and I'll put that up in the chat. But that's the place to call and report it. We'll get out. You have a great roads crew on Vashon that serves both Vashon and Maury Island, so call them. Just a reminder, I'm going to promote this every time I come and talk to you good folks, that We have a community van on Vashon that is available to anyone who doesn't have a car and needs it. The link to that is in the chat. So feel free to use that. Sort of it's a great service that's available to you at not much cost at all. And lastly, David and I have been having conversations about getting some litter cans out, and the commercial core of Vashon, we're working on that. I think it is doable. And probably sometime after the first of the year, we'll begin to work on that in earnest. We are waiting for final signing of contracts that will create the crews that will be able to pick that up and also do sort of general beautification and litter control in the downtown commercial core area, something we call the conservation core. Those are folks who are formerly homeless or currently homeless who are seeking transitional employment. And we are currently using them in the communities of Skyway and White Center. And we're going to expand that program to other areas of unincorporated King County. And in this case, Vashon Island, as well as Fairwood and a couple of other areas. So more to come on that, but I think David and I had a good discussion about it. I think we have the makings of a plan. There's of course lots more going on, but those are my high notes for you this month. And I see hands up, and I'll start with Micah's Kitchen. What's your question?
My hand was up before you spoke, and I didn't, I forgot to take it down. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Linda Moore, you have a question?
Okay.
Linda Moore, you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Yeah. I did, and I'm, oh, thank you. Just curious, you talked about container.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Breaking up, yep.
A combination of recycling and trash, or would a container? Okay, so I just have a question about the litter receptacles. Would it be actually a container for recyclables and a container for trash, or is it all one?
At this point, it would just be litter. What we're probably going to do is either just use a dumpster that we have at the roads maintenance facility for garbage, or we will expand that dumpster, and that's where we'll haul it to and dump it. Little known fact, but I spent several years working in the solid waste industry before I came to my current position. And I would just say from experience, public recycling cans generally end up being litter anyway, because people just aren't very disciplined about what they throw in there. So, you know, a lot of the public recycling cans you see out in Seattle, by the time they get done collecting that, it just goes into the landfill because you can't, it's so contaminated with garbage. So let's start with garbage and where it goes, and possibly we could do a recycling can in the future. Evie Moore Horton, you have a hand up.
I do. Hi, thanks. We're about a year away from a pedestrian death on the island at an intersection at Bank and 100th. And I just wanted to call attention to the strobe lights that have been installed by the county.
Yep.
And encourage everyone and anyone who's crossing there to utilize those strobe lights. One doesn't have to be an older person to use them. I think sometimes people have seen the placement up above or below the senior citizen sign, but please just everyone, and please do use them to hopefully encourage drivers to slow down and take care.
Yeah, we had a pretty good fender bender out there this past month, and sent a roads crew out to clean up the debris. But there are just some folks that all the lights in the world aren't going to keep them from being not the best drivers in the world. But we're doing what we can there. We're going to be monitoring the tree that we pruned back to see how that works. We think it's been pretty effective so far, but we'll do a little bit more work on it and see where we are.
Yeah, just to follow up there, the crash that happened against the senior center's outdoor sign, the tree, of course, would mitigate any kind of damage to a human who might have been standing there if a tree was there. So I hope that, certainly hope that the tree can continue to be where it is.
Yeah, they're good barriers.
Indeed.
Better to hit a tree than a person.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions for you, John, and thank you very much for joining our meeting again, and thank you for working with me on the litter issue. For the information of people present, I think what we're planning to do, or what we're hoping to do, is have a total of 5 litter collection cans in the uptown area of Vashon, have one in front of the Vashon Art Center, one in front of the roastery, and then 2 in the town of Burton. So it would be a total of 9 cans that we're hoping to get installed. And John, I was unable to get a donation of those cans from Waste Connections. They don't have any of those heavy duty cans, so we're going to have to look around for that.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out to the Parks Department and others and see if we can scare some up somehow.
Okay, great. Okay, and thanks.
I think that's a surmountable challenge.
Great
to get those.
Okay, well, thanks again. Any other questions? Well, I guess you're free to go, John. Thank you.
All right, everybody have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is Kevin Jones would like to make the following motion. As islanders who believe in the dignity and humanity of all, we are outraged by the racist language splattered across shelter tables and elsewhere at the Village Green and on an uptown building. This act was cowardly and anonymous, serving no purpose except to intimidate, wound, and divide. We will not stand for this denigration of our fellow islanders. The Vashon-Maury Island Community Council celebrates our community's increasing diversity and commits to show up for racial justice and equity. So if the motion is made and seconded, it will be voted on at the December 20th meeting of the Community Council. And having screened the language of this motion, taking into account what the purposes of a 501c3 or a 501c4 or C6 are, this one is a legitimate motion and we can do it. So, all right, Kevin, would you like to speak to this?
I would. Thank you, David. So many of us not only know of this statement, but have our names attached to it in this week's version of the Beachcomber. I will say that while amendments are certainly to be considered, recognize that the statement was coordinated by a number of different groups on the island who are basically the subject of intimidation. And so I believe it's important that unless we find severe concerns about the wording, that this is the wording that is been recommended by members of those groups. And I believe it's important for us to honor their basically condoning this particular set of words. That being said, that group, for anybody who would like to suggest an amendment here, what I'd like to do is take that back to the authors of the words and have them coordinate that through the group so we can get feedback on those words and possibly then back to you, David, and the board in terms of exactly what would be voted on in December. Let's see, I do say that in my view, we are all the community council. There are board members here. We're all council members if we're on Vashon. And in my opinion, this is a statement of our values. And I think it's important that we take that step and not be silent in this situation. So I hope there's a second and I appreciate any questions people might have.
Thank you, Kevin. Now I see Justin's hand is raised. Is that intended or is that from a previous hand raise? Okay, Justin, I'd like to call on you.
I'd like to second the motion as written.
Okay. Michael, you have your hand raised?
Yes. You know, I support the whole idea of supporting racial justice and equity, but I'm concerned about the wording of this, specifically the last sentence where it uses the phrase to show up for racial justice and equity. I would suggest, because that's too vague. We could argue for a long time about what that means and what that requires of the community council. And I think that could lead to a lot of unproductive time. I would suggest replacing it with commits to address racial justice and equity issues that are brought to the community council. To me, that's less vague, and it's suggesting that the council will address these issues. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
And could I get that language again? Commits to.
It is in the chat, David.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right. And then Mika, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I do. So I'm just curious. I mean, yes, there were, you know, acts that are, you know, sickening, but how these are cowards that they do paintings or write things, and this has happened for years and centuries. And although we don't agree with it or tolerate it, what exactly is the action to be taken to say, oh, I think this is horrible? I mean, we can all do that, but what is the council going to do, or what is going to be brought to the table? Is there going to be a committee that takes off graffiti? What's going to happen? That's my question.
Okay, good question. Let's see, Evie Horton.
Hi, thanks. I can't remember the exact short sentence that uses the phrase, "We will not stand for this," or something like that. That I wonder if that's just a little slightly problematic. If I'm not mistaken, Washington is not a quote stand your ground state, but it's, for me, it just sort of brings up the issue of standing one's ground and this notion that someone can almost shoot before to defend oneself. So that I don't know if we want to maybe tweak that a bit, because I'm assuming that we are not aligning ourselves with the stand your ground.
Evie, would you think that the word tolerate, we will not tolerate this denigration, would be a better word so it wouldn't evoke that stand your ground type thing?
You know, that was on the tip of my tongue, David, too, as I thought I should bring this up. You know, just tolerate can be a tricky word too, but I defer to what the council would come up with here or at another time. I just wanted to flag that just because it is something that for me just evokes violence, that stand your ground idea. But tolerate perhaps could settle it. I don't know. Okay, and then the commits to show up for racial justice. You know, a word that came to my mind was just commits to support racial justice and equity, as opposed to show up. And I was just thinking the word support in the sentence that I mentioned too. You know, this is insupportable or something, but maybe that's too vague. Okay, all right. Camille. Camille, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, sorry, it takes me, it takes me a second to unmute, sorry.
Okay.
I really appreciate this discussion. This is awesome. Thank you, Kevin, for bringing this motion. And I just wanted to know, are people interested in creating a committee around this? Because I do feel like, you know, saying, oh, we're committed to showing up is one thing. Creating a committee who has a chair and then people, you know, come to monthly or weekly meetings or whatever it is, like showing up, that is a concrete way of showing up. Again, I'm just curious. I don't want to, I'm not asking anyone specifically to do anything, but if we were going to pass this, is that something that would be part of the showing up?
And so would that be like a diversity committee or a racial justice committee, something of that nature?
Yeah, or community harmony committee, or it doesn't have to be like specifically racially justice. I think it can be anything that is, community harmony oriented. But if people wanted to do specifically, racial justice, I'm just interested to know, obviously Kevin, obviously from you because you're the one who proposed it, but anybody, is that like a committee that you guys would be willing to start and participate in? Because again, that shows showing up. Instead of, just kind of saying showing up.
Okay, Diane?
Okay. Yes, I signed it and I absolutely support it. I am mostly concerned about what it means for the community council, because the way it's worded is perfect for people or individuals to sign on to that. When you're talking about an organization signing on to it, it's a bit different. For example, we take a vote here and we say, okay, we've all voted for this. Where does it show up down the road when the board has all changed and so forth? Either forming a committee to address it makes sense, or putting it in our policies somewhere where it won't get forgotten that a vote was taken 10 years ago, and now what? So, so that's part of it. I like some of these suggestions for different wording, and a bit more specifics about how we're going to do this. Something about how we're going to commit to address things. So I just like to mention that, and I am putting it in a Word document. Some of these different ideas and wordings like this. So one possibility for the last sentence is the Vashon-Maury Island Community Council celebrates our community's increasing diversity and commits to support racial justice and equity by creating a racial justice and equity committee. And that might be one way to do this.
Okay,
thanks.
Great. Hunter, you have your hand raised.
I was thinking perhaps I was contacted by another organization to sign this petition, and perhaps going back to some of those other organizations too, to form a committee together. And I know, and for instance, work with a group that can go out and scrub out graffiti, which I've done once. Is not a very fun job to do, but there is a right way and a wrong way to do it, depending on that. So if anybody knows of some of the organizations that contacted them and put them in the chat, maybe we could get hold of those and start it that way.
Okay. Now I saw that just
wait. So David Justin's had his hand up for a while. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I saw that, and he had spoken earlier, so I just wanted to call him again, but I waited until the end. Justin?
Okay, I think that means it's my turn. Thanks, David. Speak in favor of the motion, speak in favor of it as written. And I'd just like to highlight, in addition to all the great things that people have already said, that the phrase show up for racial justice carries a certain meaning that has been brought with it in the discussions on racial equity and equity in society lately. And so I think it's not accidental language, right? But it refers to showing up to rallies and showing up for each other and being there for each other. So I think that language is important to keep in there.
Okay, I didn't see any other hands raised. So this,
David, I would like to just provide some closure on that.
Oh, okay.
If that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Sure.
I didn't have a chance to get my hand up. Thanks, Diane, for taking notes. And thanks, Hunter. I think the organizations that created the statement, I have been in close coordination with them. And I've been emailing actually with one of the women who worked to get the ad in the Beachcomber, for example. And I do know that the folks doing that work are already very active in terms of their racial equity work, and they have groups they meet on a regular basis, and they have very specific missions that they're working to accomplish. So they are possibly would be interested in forming a committee of the Vashon-Maury Island Community Council. I would say my understanding of that conversation with them to date is that we should not expect that. But if somebody does want to create a committee, you never know who you might draw into it. So I will just put that there for the record of people considering that. I personally think it is a good idea. I'm also affiliated with these other groups who are doing work already, but there's more room at the table. So hopefully people will feel very compelled to want to create that type of a group to further address the issues that we know are important for us here on the island.
Well, thank you, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. So that will be on next month's meeting for a vote. And our position on these motions is that if the maker of the motion is friendly to a proposed amendment, then you can just change your motion to adopt the amendment without any further action on the part of the board. Okay, Kevin? So if you want to adopt any of the language, that would be fine. Okay?
Okay, that sounds good. And yes, Justin.
It has been seconded. Yes.
Justin, okay, thanks.
Okay,
Sorry.
And now I'd like to call on Justin to address ferry disruptions and implications.
So David, are we going to have any more new business?
Not that I'm aware of, unless someone has new business that they wanted to bring up, but that's not anything that has been brought up to our attention. There is generally community updates or open discussion where we could bring up new items. But
I have an item of new business.
And what is that? If we could do this briefly.
Yeah, it'll be very brief. I'd like to make a motion that in the future, if and when the motion passes, that the VMICC start its monthly general meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Looking for a second.
I will second. Hold on. Second. Hold on, I can second it. I'm looking for my.
You can second.
Thank you, Mika.
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, I'll second the motion.
We can hear you. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Do you have to be a citizen of the United States to belong to the VMICC?
I'm a United States citizen.
Maybe you have to be. I don't know. It's just a question. I don't know. I'm supposed to say
no, you do not.
That you have to be a citizen of the U.S. You just have to be a resident of Vashon Island. So there's no citizen requirement.
Are you supposed to say this allegiance if you're not a United States person? I don't know. I don't know what the
That's a good question. That's something we can discuss. Well, if there's nothing wrong with having a short discussion right now.
I think the answer to that would be no one has to force to say it. It's just like recited.
What's that, Gavin? I couldn't hear you.
I imagine no one's forced to say it. You just recite it at the beginning like a land acknowledgement. I think that's the idea, right, Armin? Is that?
Yeah. There was an act of Congress, I don't know, 40 or 70 years ago that no one has to recite the pledge or any particular word of it just because it's something that's done as a ceremonial thing at the beginning of the meeting. It's done by the fire department, the school board, many organizations do that. And some people choose not to recite the pledge or choose not to say one or two particular words that are controversial to them. So that's it.
All right, well then that motion will also be on as old business for a vote at next month's meeting. Okay, now if we can move on to Justin Hirsch from the Ferry Advisory Committee. Actually, before you start, Justin, I would indicate to this group that we are looking for nominations to the Ferry Advisory Committee. The Vashon-Maury Island Community Council is tasked by the state legislature with appointing members to the Ferry Advisory Committee, and we have a vacancy. So we're looking for a new member for the Ferry Advisory Committee. And one of our members is here, Justin Hirsch, who's going to talk to us about ferry disruptions and the implications.
Hi, thanks, David. So just my regular caveat, I'm not an employee of Washington State Ferries. I'm just a Vashon resident and a daily ferry commuter. I have a little bit of information to share, and per statute, one of the important things that the committee is supposed to do is bring local expressions back to the WSF and the legislature. So after I give some information, if people have some comments or some questions, to the extent that I can answer them, I'm happy to. It's entirely possible that I can't answer the question, but I can bring that question back and get some answers. So obviously we're on this two-boat schedule, this temporary reduced sailing schedule. Nobody likes this any less than I do. And just a little bit of information behind it. WSF had decided, maybe I reported on some of this last month, but WSF had decided that with the uncertainty around how many staff members they were going to have after the October 18th vaccine mandate came into place, they decided it was better to give the consistent service that they knew they would be able to give with the two-boat schedule rather than canceling a bunch of sailings with the summer three-boat schedule. So that was the logic that went into it. I am told reliably that there's 1,100 employees of Washington State Ferries, and that includes administrative and ticketing and everything, right? Not just crew on the vessels. Out of that number, 132 people separated. That's either separated or retired on or immediately after October 18th. 121 of those separated rather than prove vaccine status. 11 retired, so we don't know exactly what their intent was, but 8 of those 11 stated that it was their intent to retire due to the vaccine mandate. An additional 33 people, for a total of 165, are not at work. They're on leave because they're not fully vaccinated. So an awful lot of those people are crew members or engineers. Fortunately, not very many of those are on the triangle route, at least as far as I know. But obviously that had a pretty significant impact system-wide, and so I'm reliably informed that that's kind of the main reason that we're looking at the schedule we're looking at right now. So that's that piece. The committees regarding the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock have met. I don't believe they've come to any conclusions. I think they've just had their very first meetings. So that's where that issue's at. I think that's all I got off the top of my head for right now. May I take some questions, David?
Sure. I know I have a question if no one else does. And my question is, do you perceive any issues in the discussion with the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock that could adversely impact Vashon? I know there's the question of whether just to close it and move it downtown, if that's a viable, proposal, but are there other proposals that might, have an impact on us?
So in answer to your direct answer to your question, yes, there are definitely issues that will affect Vashon and Southworth. I don't think there is any serious proposal of closing the Fauntleroy dock and moving Triangle Route ferry service downtown. Partially because it's a much longer crossing to go from the north end to downtown, which would theoretically mean dramatically reduced service. It won't mean that because there's not a serious proposal to do that, right?
Okay.
Second, because I don't think the city of Seattle is real hot on delivering more automobiles right into the center of downtown. And I think that if they had their druthers now, I get the sense that they would probably put the Coleman dock anywhere other than downtown. Not that anybody in Seattle particularly wants it in their neighborhood, but yeah, I think, they've basically made their plans for the renovation of the Coleman dock. Those plans are complete. That construction's, underway. I won't say it's nearing completion, but, the plans are there, and there's no plans for Triangle Route ferry service there that I'm aware of.
So are you saying that the Fauntleroy ferry dock is essentially a done deal already, but they're having all these public meetings just so that they can pay lip service to them?
No, I think there are some substantial decisions that need to be made around the Fauntleroy ferry dock. As I understand it, the issue in the Fauntleroy ferry dock is really the wooden pilings underneath the dock, much as they were on our Vashon dock. The existing structure, I think, doesn't meet the seismic requirements. It's deficient in a number of regards. We know it's deficient in a number of regards as far as functionality of ferry service, but I think it's also deficient in terms of some, building code and structural requirements. And that essentially is the impetus for WSF to undertake this project. There is I'm blanking on the exact terminology, but there has been a plan to rebuild, ferry terminals successively, one after another throughout the system over a number of years. Mukilteo got a big brand new ferry terminal. They're doing the Coleman dock. Fauntleroy's next.
Is there any legitimate push to go to a 2-slip ferry dock?
Well, I'm sure there will be a wide range of discussions about all of the different possibilities. And certainly those are things that the community group and the engineering group and the executive group are all going to have to grapple with as they try and make recommendations. I could give you a personal opinion on the 2-slip ferry dock if you're interested in it.
Well, go right ahead.
Okay. So, I don't say this lightly. I've worked in the maritime industry in the private sector for the last 18 years, loaded and unloaded all kinds of ocean-going vessels, including passenger vessels and roll-on, roll-off cargo and automobile ships. I don't think a 2-slip option is viable. Whenever you design, terminal infrastructure like that, the terminal infrastructure and the landside infrastructure have to balance. Otherwise, you have a lot of capacity on one side and a constraint and a bottleneck on the other side, right? Fauntleroy Way is part of that bottleneck, and the terminal itself right now is part of that bottleneck. So,
okay,
I have a few other ideas to put out there as far as how we could improve the Fauntleroy dock. I mean, obviously, we have the disparity in the capacity between the dock and the vessels, right? So the dock holds about 80 cars, maybe 82 if you get them in there, squeeze them in there nice and tight. The Issaquah class vessels that we typically see on the Triangle Route hold somewhere between 120 or 124 cars, right? So those 40 or so cars are waiting up the street on Fauntleroy Way. And I think that all three communities would be very, very well served by a dock that would hold the capacity of one vessel on the dock. So you don't have to, loading the boat doesn't have to wait on ticketing. And that traffic that would normally be clogging up Fauntleroy Way can be on the dock. There's obviously environmental concerns about expanded overwater structures, right? Impact on salmon, eelgrass, all these things. There's also concerns from neighbors who, you know, in my view, really would prefer the sort of quaint little ferry dock with a few Model Ts that it saw in the 40s, and not the key piece of marine infrastructure transportation hub that it is today.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Justin. And I'd like to remind the audience that anyone who's interested in these discussions can at least view the discussions as they're going, because most of them are Zoom meetings. So I would urge you to view them and participate to whatever extent you can so that Vashon's voice can be heard. And thank you for being on the Ferry Advisory Committee, Justin. It sounds like you're an ideal person on that. Okay.
Thanks, and I'm going to go to bed because I got to get on the 5:20 tomorrow.
Okay, thanks for waiting up with us. All right. The next item on our agenda is the Community Updates Zero Waste Vashon. And is Nancy O'Connor here?
She is, but she's offering to postpone her update to next month, and I think that's probably a really good idea.
Okay. Is there any person who had a burning item for discussion in our open discussion?
David?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that if the board decides to form a committee for realigning the community council,
okay,
I do have the time and some of the knowledge that's needed to realign it. And so if they want to set something up, I'd be happy to serve on that.
I really appreciate that, Bill, and I believe we'll take you up on that.
Yeah, my only goal is to see this thing run smoothly and not have happen what happened to the last one. I'm not really involved in all the other aspects.
Right, and you notice I wasn't hostile to your discussion. You know, I mean, as long as it's in there in writing and we're bound by it, we need to observe it.
And I also know how to get us out of it.
Good, good. I like that. You know, I think that that's, you know, it's so much better when you have a solution instead of just a complaint.
So, like Terry Sullivan was looking for when he made his statement, what he wanted for a council.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Bill, for participating, and I look forward to working with you on this. Okay. Anyone else with regard to open discussion? Is there anyone who had an issue that they want the community council to address either now or sometime in the future? Okay, well, we'll always have time in the future to open that issue up again.
I have something.
Oh, okay. Hi, Steve.
Hi. I'm just trying to get used to the whole system.
Okay.
But I do have a concern that
okay.
I'm willing to work on these things too.
Right.
I have a real concern, and I want you to know I'm just not an ogre for homeless people, but I'm very concerned about the vehicle that is parked up by the cemetery.
By the cemetery.
And there's a couple reasons for that. I go by that place 3-4 times a day. And my issue is really an issue of safety. If now when you, well, of course, with daylight savings time, but if the sun's going that way and you're going east, there is no way you can see that vehicle until you're right upon the vehicle. There is, I think the squirrels now have been outnumbered by the rats that I see going across the street. And then the other issue that I see is because that car is there, other cars go way out around it. And we have so many bikers that are coming up the road, you know, different ways that I've seen several times when either bikers or cars have swerved to avoid each other. I also talked to Lisa Devereaux at the cemetery, and they've talked to the King County, and they basically say there is nothing they can do. But I also talked to the King County Sheriff and I said, could you even put some, you know, orange cones or something in front of the car or behind the car? Or because, you know, if somebody's on a phone for 2 or 3 seconds and swerves off to that side, that place, that thing is just going to be destroyed. And I really don't want anybody to get hit. And I also, having worked on Voice of Vashon with series on Vietnam veterans and interviewing series of Vietnam veterans, and there are over 600 Vietnam, well, over 600 veterans buried in that cemetery. I think that trash up there is a real dishonor and a real desecration to those veterans and friends of mine. So that's my concern. I don't know what we can do. I'd be willing to talk to anybody. I'd pay to have the guy moved out of it.
Steve, our next month's meeting in December, Major Joe Hodgson, who's the major for Precinct 4, the sheriff, I mean, the top sheriff for our area, will be at our community council meeting. And that would be an opportune time for you to raise this issue to his attention.
And I'll do a little more research too, just to see.
Okay, and I know that when they were having issues about some vehicles being parked on the roadside that were being used as residences, there was a real concern on the part of the sheriff's office not to basically throw homeless people out of their, you know, shelter. So that especially during COVID. So,
well, and I think that's one of the things that they said to me. If it's being used as a residence, you know, they can't. You know, it's in the right of way. They can't do anything. But I've never seen a person there. Okay. All the time that I've been there. So.
Okay.
I mean, somebody's there obviously at different times because it's piling up more and more. But,
and maybe there are parking ordinances that can be used, but that's something that you definitely can raise to Major Joe Hodgson next month.
All right.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you very much for your listening to me.
Sure, Steve. Are there other items that people would like to bring to our attention? Okay, I don't see anyone's hand raised. Well, then our next meeting date is Monday, December 20th. And as you can tell from this meeting, we will have a busy meeting next month. So I hope it will go a little bit smoother than this month. And I take some of the responsibility for the wording of our, you know, incorporation papers, but hopefully with Bill Lyle's help, we'll be able to straighten that out. So thank you all for participating. And it's a work in progress. And we're here to enable the members of the community to speak their minds, as Terry said, and, you know, to address their First Amendment issues and also to be heard by government entities and powers that be like Puget Energy. So thank you all for participating, and we'll see you next month. Good night.
Thank you, David.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, John Boy. I was going to say that.
All right. Right.
That was a meeting. Holy moly. That was a good one, though.
Yeah. It's always a little controversy is always good for us.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to end the meeting and kick everybody out. Good night.